So I've been tutoring NCLEX candidates, nursing grads that are preparing to take their NCLEX. I've been doing that for a few years now. And one of the things that I have found that is common among many of nursing graduates, whether I tutor them, coach, or just conversation or post my social posts, is seeing the bigger picture, putting the concepts, nursing concepts, healthcare concepts together so that they can apply it to their NCLEX. There are a lot of often gaps in their knowledge and application, or knowledge. And one of the things that I do is I help to bridge those gaps. I help be that intermediary that helps them to see clearly what it is that they're missing. And because I believe that once you see it, when you can see what you're missing, you have a greater chance of creating the solution, right? Because, you've heard the quote, the saying that I believe is Albert Einstein. I just thought of that we cannot solve the problem with the same mind. So my job as a coach, and even dealing with health coaching, and I it actually works for me across the boards, in all areas of my life, even as a mother, as a wife, is that if I can help you to see what it is that you're missing at that point, that you're not seeing, right? Then we're transforming your mind to become more clearer, and therefore you have a different mindset, and you're more open to, or receptive to, the truth and making those necessary changes. It was during my time as an undergrad in the nursing program that I realized, seeing the bigger picture, it is a prime concept in the generational cycle of pain. And I'll talk about that in a second. But I remember starting to take my nursing classes, and I had a test coming up, the heart exam, right? We were studying the heart, and I wanted to try something. I said, if I just try to understand how the heart works, the principles of the heart, the function of the heart, and what it does, then will that help me to basically take the test? So as a science, in the school of science or life, if I can understand it, will I be able to apply it? And so I tested that hypothesis by really going through and understanding the heart. I love the heart. I love that nursing, that part of that, the nursing knowledge or program, understanding the body and the different process, the function, the cells. And so I studied for understanding. I wasn't so much about memorization. It was more about understanding, which I definitely, encourage nursing graduates and NCLEX candidates to do more of than anything. And lo and behold, when I took my test, it just seemed like it flowed easily for me, and I don't remember if I got a 94% or 100%. I missed 0 or 1, but it was confirmation for me that if I understand the bigger picture and not focus on the very little details, right? The little details that can get you confused. You start learning mnemonics and different things and trying to remember this part and this part and this part and that part. If I just see the bigger picture, that test confirmed that I can aim for understanding. And in the Bible, thinking about that, in the book of Proverbs, it says to aim for understanding. It's the way to the wise, to aim for understanding. And so that confirmed it for me. And what I did was, as I studied for exams, as and it crossed the line of my life, and understanding and being in an environment where, I've been through, some cycles of pain, and just really not trying to focus on the little bitty details, even though they make up large, and, not getting angry, confused, bitterness, and all that, because often when you focus on the little details, you get all these different emotions. But if I have a bigger vision, if I have a vision of, what it is that I am going forth for understanding, going through life, then I can see that my ultimate vision is to enjoy my life, to be happy, to learn from my life. I talked about me developing the student approach as I went through my mother's front, our front yard. It was filled with different plants and flowers, and I would walk, and I would be frustrated. So I remember being frustrated. She just planted all this stuff and all this grass, and what about the grass? And not knowing that that was my mini sanctuary of really transforming my mind from a negative place, being scared of men because of what happened to you, looking at and deciding, no, I can't live that way, looking at changing the word from mistakes to life lessons, really brought that student approach to it. And here I am in nursing school learning and confirming, if I can just get the bigger picture, when we talk about the generational cycle of pain, if we can understand the bigger picture, if we can see the bigger vision of our lives, that I am here, you are here. I'm here not to harm you, Jeremiah 29:11, but to give you hope and to give you a future. That each of us have our curriculum that we go through with the divine creator inside of us, having all the tools that we need to transcend our experiences, right? To find our purpose for being in through our experiences and our gifts and our talents, through the things that bring us joy and happiness, and bringing that about as to our divine message on earth, because our purpose is our message. What are we here to reflect from the truth? Each one of us, and many of it is grounded in the same principles, right? Because we are part of this vine, this tree of life that feeds us, right? When you think about your lungs, and you think about the trees, and you think about your body, and that magnificence of it, the correlation of it, that we are all here with much of the same ultimate message, which is love, LOVE. And so, are we talking to our children about the bigger message, about the bigger vision on their lives? That each one of these experiences are not here to define us, to make us bitter, to deter us from a life of abundance and joy, but to help us to enjoy it in such a way that our character is strong enough to withstand the storms that come often in our lives, right? To understand that no matter what you do or don't do, I have this bigger vision that I'm holding in front of me. And that turns into conviction, because it's the conviction of knowing that I am here for a reason, for a purpose. Often when you think about teenage suicide, when you think about peer pressure, when you think about homicides and robberies, and, we get so fixated on these experiences that happens in our lives, and we let them deter us from the truth that resides in us. We see them as though they are connected to other experiences, because I've mentioned how, when we experience something, we were to take up those jewels, those treasures, and take them to the next experience and utilize them. I've seen it where, man, I feel like I made an error. I learned something. And before I beat myself up, I'm like, okay, so I'm going to need to do this, what I didn't do for an upcoming experience. And so I make sure that I keep my eyes open, right, on the bigger picture. I don't focus on the minute and what happened. Yes, I was a little frustrated. I wanted to do something different. But I know that whatever I didn't do, there's something bigger that's coming ahead of me, right? Whether you didn't read something correctly, you burned something cooking, or you didn't get that contract, or whatever it was. Maybe you missed something on the contract. I believe that we are giving second chances, and these second chances, quote unquote, second chances, are other experiences that, like another level of experience, that we're supposed to take what we've learned, the key principle. And and that's such a redeeming place where you're like, I know what to do now with this experience. But if we're so caught up on our individual experiences, we often shut ourselves out of seeing the bigger picture. We don't look for, we stay in the past. We let our emotions and our feelings take hold of us, right? We let regret seep into our soul. We wonder why we're anxious and for the future, and anxiety attacks, and why we have rheumatism, of arthritis of our joints, the inflammation, the inflamed thinking turns into an inflammation body, right? Or a body that's against itself. When we start thinking about rare diseases and autoimmune diseases, that there is much to what we experience on earth as to what we there's much to it than what we experience. It's more of what we actually take in to ourselves and make it part of our identity. And so when I'm talking about the bigger picture, I'm talking about really, sitting down and asking, start asking, how was your day? And setting that expectation of really talking things through with our children, because often they can hold things inside of themselves. And that more experiences kind of compile and compile and compile, and before you know it, there's this inner hatred, there's this depression, there's the inner sadness, there's the anxiety, not knowing what the future is going to hold and what's going to happen. Instead of being excited about the future and being excited what they learn, they're now afraid of it because they've focused on the individual experiences. And I was actually thinking about, I was folding clothes, and I was thinking, okay, I didn't do the Seeds We Plant series, and what can I talk about? And immediately it came up to see the bigger picture. How are you seeing the bigger picture? How are you helping your children? Because if we have, as parents and caregivers, if we're so narrow focused on what somebody did and what somebody didn't do, if we can't see the hearts of men, we can't see the projection of their pain, their sadness, or insecurities, and then we take it on ourselves and we become sad and we have these insecurities, we're just continually generating a cycle of pain, of insecurities, of sadness, of frustration, of anger, instead of the cycle of love, which says, okay, I'm going to learn from this experience. I'm going to see it for what it truly is. I'm going to be a truth seeker. And even, someone has said something mean to me or did something mean to me, I know it's not about me, it's how they're reacting. It's their insecurities or their sadness or whatever it may be coming from, their depression, their anxiety. And it's like they're trying to put it on me. And I remember as a child, when I would hear that, people say, well, you're going to be like this and you're like this. And I would step back and I say, no, that's your pain. That's your perception. That's your opinion. And so I'm going to give that back to you. And I would mentally see myself like those words or whatever was said being pushed back to that person. For one, try, thinking about seeing the bigger picture. Another, two, if you're seeing the bigger picture, you don't accept everything that someone gives to you. You may think about it, but you're not taking it inside of your internal garden and allowing weeds of regret and guilt and anger and shame and a lack of belonging. You're not letting all that grow inside of you, and to a point where you become this adult and everybody's wondering, well, what happened? What happened to that person? It's like those seeds, those weeds just constantly over the years robbed you of really seeing the bigger picture, robbed you of your joy, robbed you of the promises of abundant life, robbed you of hope and future. Because you didn't know, or you refused to see, or the bigger picture, or you stayed in that past experience. So when I talk to my children, and I hear my son, he's like, but mom, that's his anger. And Kayla say, well, I get it, mom, that we don't focus so much on the doubt, but we focus on ourselves, that we are responsible for our behaviors. And so they're seeing beyond what is said and what is done. Do they still get angry? Sometimes my son, do I still get angry? Yeah, but then it's a process of catching myself and saying, wait a minute, that doesn't belong to me. And it's these thoughts as a child, when they say train a child how they will go, and when they're older, they won't depart from it. And I think it's not so much departing from it, what I saw in my childhood to adulthood. I think that so much can happen that you can kind of leave your teachings to the side, right? They don't leave you. You just kind of turn away from them. And it's during my late 40s into my 50s, God willing, that I am starting to realize the importance of much of the teaching, the principles, seeing the bigger picture that happened to me as a child, bringing it back up. And one of them is seeing the bigger picture. That's what nursing school did for me. And as I tutor and I coach, I'm able to see it, and I'm also able to do the same. Talk to my children about it, and creating this cycle of love, to see beyond the words, to see the truth. That the truth doesn't need to argue with anyone. The truth is the truth. So you don't have to put up a fight. You can rest assured that that is energy that you can maximize doing something else. You don't have to spend a lot of energy, a lot of time with your with these experiences that are often not about you. It's somebody else, and dealing with their painful experience, dealing still with their past, seeing the individual pictures or experiences as something that is against them instead of something that is for them. So I know in this busy lifestyle, and it can be so easy to not reflect on life. And we hear that, and we hear many adults that are saying that, um, a lot of programs that are saying, reflect. But if we can teach our children to reflect, that will help, I believe, minimize a lifetime of pain, years of pain, years of unwinding, undoing. That, yes, we want to be here for the adults, but more importantly, too, and just on the same level, just as important, we need to be there for our children and encouraging them to reflect, showing them how to reflect on the day's experiences and what they glean from the experience, and how does that fit into the bigger picture of yourself, the vision of yourself as a dancer. How can that fit? Well, mom, I don't listen to what other people say. I focus on my routines. I don't have to listen to everybody's opinion. How many dancers have you heard about that had issues with self esteem? And how many women, teenage girls, issues with eating habits, right? Bulimia, anorexia, you know. So if we can right now talk to our children, ask them, what does it mean in bigger picture? What is the vision for your life? And what you experience today, how can you use that? What are some nuggets that you can glean from that will help you? And I believe in the importance of asking why, asking open-ended questions. Not, do you feel like that'll be helpful to you in the future, but how do you feel that will be helpful to your future? And they can answer, well, I don't think it is, or they can say, I think it was trying to tell me to be self-reliant, to rely on myself. Because it says at age 4, we start making connections in our lives, in our experiences. And Piaget, one of oh gosh, that dealt with learning, said that around 12, we start forming these formal cooperations. But I believe that, even at young age, what did you get from that, Billy? What did you get from that, Sue? What did you get from that, Terry? What did you get from that, Richard? What did you get from that, Dan, Ivan? What did you get from that experience? That just opening that conversation, I believe, really helps with brain connection. And it helps them to see beyond what they experience and to say, what was I supposed to get out of this experience? And how can I use it the next time? I'm always asking my children, well, what would you do differently next time? And I even play the game where I'll have them to rewind. I'll make the noise and rewind. Let's try that differently. If they said something, they were angry, fuss, yell, rewind. And that usually gets them to laughing. How can we make it fun for them? So, like I said, I know, America is known to have a rush world. And honestly, the rush, and I've mentioned before, continue. If we buy into that, if we buy into this rush, instead of making the time to really talk to our children and helping them to see the bigger picture. That's all it takes. Making the time, 5-10 minutes, to have a conversation, to open up, to increase bonding, to increase thinking and making those connections, to see beyond their experience, to decrease teenage suicide and homicide and violence in any form, to really have these smaller connections, conversations that say, I know that happened, that probably hurts, right? We want to affirm how they're feeling. What could have been done differently? Or what do you think? What did you glean from that? Mom, I know not to call people outside their name. Whatever it is that I think is worthwhile to do. There was an old saying that children should be seen and not heard. More and more, we're finding out that if children are seen and not heard, they become adults that are seen and not heard and full of pain. Because instead of voicing their pain, they're acting out on pain. And we see the violence that we're seeing in the world, just an aspect of what is going on inside. And so I just want to share that the seeds we plant, again, how are we helping ourselves see the bigger picture, right? Because if we're talking about independent situations and we're focused on that, we're going to get bitter, upset, anger, and get all these emotions and want to be in attack mode, versus if we see, that what that person said is something I don't want to ever do. And I think I learned that today. You know what I'm saying? So if we can use these experiences to make us better instead of bitter, what kind of world will we live in then? This is Tamika Chambers with Create a Generational Love Cycle. In the Seeds We Plant series, where I talk about getting to the roots of the issues that we have today. And they don't just stem in adulthood, they actually start in childhood, and where we are continuing thought patterns that are infecting generations. And the way that we stop or break the cycle of pain is that we identify these thought patterns and we change them. We consciously change them, intentionally change them to create a generational cycle of love. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon. And as always, I do have my newsletter, Empowering You to Be You, that I share. Right now it's been bi-weekly, but just tips and perfect self-expression, and sharing now my mother's principles with moral character, and healthy eating recipes, turning traditional foods into healthier foods for the vehicle for our divine message. And on Mondays, I talk about, not this past Monday, it was Veterans Day, but on Mondays, I talk about those barriers that are often preventing us from fulfilling our divine purpose. And they're not what you think. They're not the physical barriers, but the internal barriers that become our physical barriers, right? They become the fogs. And anytime you have a foggy mind, foggy brain, you get lost, right? We get lost. So I'm doing that talk. And otherwise, you'll see messages on social media. But just want to say thanks so much for listening. And I look forward to sharing another message next week on the Seeds We Plant series. Listen to Heal from the Inside Out on Fridays as well.